Hello and welcome to the Building Our World podcast, the podcast that looks to uncover the human stories behind human innovation. This week, I am joined by Max Senges, the CEO and headmaster of 42 Wolfsburg. Max is an ex-Google man, a PhD doctorate who turned his eye last year to help disrupt the way software engineers are taught in Germany. We talk through how 42 Wolfsburg select their cohort and their unique and fresh way of teaching and peer learning, very much challenging the conventional wisdom of how schools and universities teach the current generation. We also, at the end, go into his underlying motivations of why he made the switch from a comfortable and rewarding life at Google to now be in charge of teaching the next generation of software engineers in Germany. So good morning. Max Senges, welcome to the show. I'm live in London on a crisp morning. And how are things in Wolfsburg right now?
Hi, Alex. Really nice to meet you. Thanks for inviting me. Things are actually quite wonderful. You know, it's wintertime in Germany, and we're really getting a lot of gemütlich this year with everything being locked down. So great to take some time and chat with you.
I won't ask what the COVID situation is or the lockdown situation is. I'm sure everyone's pretty sick of hearing about it, and hopefully this chat is just an escape from it. So I wanted to get you on. So you're the CEO of 42 Wolfsburg, full-time education franchise, essentially training up the next generation of German software engineers. And what was super interesting to me is your attitude to disrupting the way people learn, the best way to teach, the best way to foster an environment of high-performing people and then unleashing them into the German tech industry. But before we get into that, I was really keen to get into your journey and your situation. So to give people a little bit of context, I'm sure you'll elaborate, but you started on this journey last year. And before that, you've been in Silicon Valley at Google for a number of years and in Berlin as well. So it'd be great first if you could just talk me through your sort of journey there and then your thought process into making that leap, making that jump into what is a pretty sort of different direction. I think that'd be super interesting.
Very happy to do so, Alex. So maybe let me give you our listeners a quick sneak preview where we landed right now. You already mentioned 42, a higher education venture that will train 600 next generation software engineers in 2022. We'll be at that capacity. And the amazing thing is why I thought it was a really, really great opportunity is it has a pedagogical approach where we have no professors, no courses, and no certificates. So this is a really 100% competence-based approach. And, that's why I got so attracted, because it is so different. But you asked, how did I get there? And to elaborate a little bit on my background, and I'm happy to go back to that. So I started computer science and business in university here in Berlin, and then worked for the United Nations and saw how a big HR software, PeopleSoft, got introduced at the United Nations, and how the organization pushed back. The people pushed back. They didn't want it. And that's what got me interested, not only in how you produce excellent technology that is working and is user-friendly and so on and so forth, but think through how the organization, the human apparatus, has to adapt. So ever since I had this connection between internet and society, people and technology, and have been on those questions. How do you learn about technology? How do you get better? How do you use this biggest knowledge base that we ever created for continuous education and learning, which is at the heart of making people really mature and take good decisions in their professional path. So after that experience at the United Nations, I decided I wanted to do a PhD in philosophy, actually, and look into these knowledge practices. In fact, the PhD is about knowledge entrepreneurship. So people who are motivated and want to find and pursue opportunities to learn, to do research, or to share knowledge, to teach, to educate. And that has actually been the leitmotif of my life and my life philosophy ever since. So when I finished that PhD, I did two startups, and it was amazing. Both of them were in the education context. And then Google actually called me up more for my citizenship engagement. I was leading an NGO for human rights on the internet, and they were building their German team. I was the second one in Berlin. So really early on, they wanted to have somebody to connect with the German digital community and kind of have that conversation about the role of the internet, about the role of Google and companies like that. And so for 10 years, I worked with Google mostly on research partnerships and moderating that public conversation about topics like data protection, freedom of expression, and internet governance and such. And that was amazing. It was really a great ride. I learned a lot at Google, but I'm sure as an HR professional, you also hear that a lot. After 10 years, it was time to look for something new and
Yeah.
open a new chapter in life. And then the organizers, the founders of 42 Wolfsburg called me up, and I
Awesome.
didn't know much about it. But when they made their pitch, I immediately thought that this might be a really, really good fit. And I haven't regretted it for a moment, because it's really a wonderful combination of small and big, of new and already battle proven and established. I'm sure we're going to get a bit deeper
Yeah,
into that.
absolutely. What was I'm quite what's life like in the valley working there? Because in my mind, I've only ever done European stuff. So in my mind, it's like this far away utopia with just money and everyone working every hour of the day and the fresh food and all the kind of startup stuff. So what's it actually like working there?
So I was there a couple of times during my research period, and in fact, I did my postdoc in Stanford. So spent about half a year there, added another half year just to do consulting and continue with the startup that I did there. And then went back to Germany, did all kinds of things, and liked it so much that I pitched my wife to go back and live there for a while. And so we went and lived there from 2014 to 2018. And I have to say, it's really wonderful in terms of nature, in terms of course, the energy that is happening, that people are very entrepreneurial, etc. But as you pointed out, it's also quite stressful and it's very expensive. So I really see the two sides of going there. I personally would say that it's a well-established innovation ecosystem, but by no means unique. What is unique is the amount of venture capital that is there. That's really what sets it apart from most other environments. But to be honest, the mythos of Silicon Valley that was created really in the early days of semiconductors and of internet technologies is not necessarily there, mostly because of the sheer size and what comes with that. That it's almost an innovation mainstream, an entrepreneurial mainstream that you find there. There's still some peaks. I'm not saying it's over, but the uniqueness is not, I think, as explicit as it used to be.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember obviously I've only ever recruited into Europe, but at my old company we had like an American division. They mostly did Boston, but they'd be up against, if a candidate had an offer in Boston, or they were like relocating, it'd be like an amazing offer, like, I don't know, like $200,000 or something like that. And then some San Fran tech company would come in and just offer just obscene money. And it just seemed like a completely different world. So how would you see, because I'm quite interested in, we're obviously going to get into 42 in a bit, but I've recruited into Berlin for a number of years now and really grown to love the ecosystem there. I actually think there's a lot of opportunities for growth because although we're running out of space and things like that, it's not like an established city, so you can really build on top of it, and there aren't the kind of the natural barriers that maybe a London or a Paris would have. So what are your views on the Berlin tech ecosystem and sort of comparing it to the Valley?
I really enjoy living in Berlin, and over the years had good insights into the tech scene and the startup scene in particular as well. I was the project manager for the Google partnership with the Factory, for example, one of Berlin's bigger startup hubs, and I organized challenges for entrepreneurs with the Google competition and things like that. So I think my perspective is fairly informed over the last 10, 15 years. And it's still very positive. I have to say, Berlin has a bit of a vibe of New York, maybe. It's more comparable to that than to the Valley. But what comes with that, I think, is a lot of freedom, a lot of possibility to find new spaces, right, and inhabit them and make them startup spaces. There is quite a lot of talent coming in, especially tech talent, as you probably know much better than I do, from Eastern European countries, from sources that are maybe not as available in other areas. And frankly, I think that the uniqueness in terms of data governance and the importance that is placed on things like that is really useful as well. At Google, we always said once you've figured out how to do things in Germany, you can basically roll them out internationally. And that
that's so true.
That can really be an advantage, right? I think it's a good thing for the location. I think Berlin still has ways to go in terms of developing its profile as a digital hub, and we're still in phase one of several.
Yeah, that's so exciting though, because you'd see the growth over the last 10 years and think, is it a bubble waiting to burst? Is it saturated? But actually, it's just the start. It's just the foundation.
Yeah.
So,
unfortunately, maybe if I add one more point here, especially in difference to the Valley, I would say in terms of talent, it's very comparable. What is not very well established is the venture capital sphere. Even though there is actually quite some money in the city, that's not even necessarily the problem, but the decision-making structures and really the way that if you look at the Facebook story, for example, it's really a domino effect, right? The first one gets in, they develop the pitch together, they kind of build on top of each other. All the investments complement each other and multiply the path. And that's not very well established in Europe, certainly beyond the Series B. I think there's still some infrastructure work to be done. And interestingly, it's not something that the politics can organize. It's really something where I think the VC community needs to evolve and mature.
I know there's always criticism of the government sometimes that they're not doing enough to really foster the innovation, and they could be doing so much more.
Yeah, but, I don't buy into that.
Okay.
I think from that perspective, the policies are actually okay. It really is a question of evolving. It's always very difficult to do something the first time. The first Sun Microsystems, the first HP. Once you have a track record and you've shown that it can work one way, it's fairly easy to repeat that, and that's what we're still looking for. That's why SoundCloud, for example, was such an exciting case, and they almost made it. Right? I think they were almost that case. Here, the mapping platform, there's a couple of candidates that could have been it, but I don't think we have really seen, a big success like SAP size success coming out of Berlin.
Where is SoundCloud up to now? Do people still? Because I feel like Spotify's kind of just taken it over.
Yeah, I love SoundCloud, and I've been with them for a very long time. Service is up and running. I still listen to podcasts and other things on it. How they're doing startup-wise, company-wise, I can't tell you.
All right. So let's get back to you. So you had your time in Google, jumping between the Valley and Berlin, all the usual Google stuff, the workload, the perks, the frozen yogurt, all that stuff. And then 42 come calling. So what is it that 42 are doing? So it's a full-time programming education, and you can start from absolute scratch and graduate as a junior in 1 year, and then as a senior software engineer, or as a software engineer in 3 years. Now, that is quite rare. There's boot camps that are like 3 to 6 months that are claimed that can do the same. So what is it that 42 are doing that's different?
So there's several aspects that make 42 unique. The most important one, I think, is that this is really 100% practice-based peer learning. Let me unpack that. So most hackers, actually most real tech nerds, if you ask them, where did you learn to program? They will tell you, well, I was 11 or 16 or, however they were, maybe 36 or 66. And then I picked up a book and I got really interested and I started to do it myself. And in the maker environment, in the open source environment, there is a saying, if you can't open it, you don't own it, right? So a lot of the pioneers in tech in particular are and have always been learning with themselves, self-motivated on their own pace. And that's the one aspect that we have at 42. There is no professors, no instruction, no teaching in that sense. But what we have is a sequence of, starting with easy program challenges to harder and harder and harder. And I'm sure you've heard of Mikhailchivsky High and this state of flow, right? So the idea is to keep the learners always challenged enough so it doesn't get boring, but not too difficult so that they can't solve it by themselves. So if you see that, you can imagine that there is a path, a learning path that keeps learners constantly in that state of flow and getting better and finding out more and learning without actually having to listen to all the theory that is behind what they're doing. You're actually doing it. It's like, building up an IKEA furniture or something like that.
Right? So where does the knowledge... Sorry to jump in. So where does the knowledge come from then if it's peer-to-peer? Where's the sort of starting point?
So far, I've only talked about the challenge, right? What are you doing? The way you're finding the answers on how to do it is really by connecting to the biggest knowledge base humanity ever created, the internet. Right? You work with my former employer. I still think that that might be the eighth world wonder, that little search slot where you can ask anything and that Oracle gives you back fairly good answers. So they're using a lot of Google. They're going to the forum, to Stack Overflow, to YouTube, to Reddit. and basically find out themselves. And I think mindset-wise, that's really an absolute essential part. When you're a 42 student, you don't just go through training materials and you do the exercises, that they ask you to do. Is you find out the solution yourself. So there's an old Confucius saying that basically goes, if I tell you, you'll forget. If I show you, you'll remember. If I make you do it, you'll actually get the competence, get the skill to do it. We're all on that last bit. So you're going out on the internet, you're finding the solution. Importantly, you already are part of a learner community. So if you're stuck, you basically post in the forum, you ask some friends, and they will point you in the right direction. Importantly, they're all trained, all students, all 42 stuff is trained not to give an answer. Right? They will tell you something like, hey, why don't you try search for X? Or have you tried looking over there? That kind of thing. So you're really trained to become a problem solver yourself. And then the second aspect that I think is unique and really, really smart about the 42 approach is the peer learning. Because it's not just that you help each other. It's actually that when you've written the code, you think you're almost there, you hand it over and you get a peer to review it. This is, of course, age-old academic practice. And in fact, all big companies, all software engineering shops have peer reviews before you check in code into, the bigger program code base, the bigger architecture that the company is producing. Of course, because if you have a company like Google with billions of lines of code, if everybody would just check in what they think is right, you'll get a real mess. So there is a very strict practice on peers looking at your code, saying like, hey, the documentation is not there yet. Have you considered doing X, Y, Z? So learning together, getting that feedback from somebody else, taking that feedback in. And in case of 42, you're also giving feedback on what you heard from your peer. So this skill of learning and hearing from others, taking in other perspectives, giving other perspectives to your peers is something that people get trained in as well. So you not only leave 42 as a pretty decent software developer, you're leaving with a mindset of solving problems and being able to team up and work in group scenarios. And I think that's really the combination that makes us unique. And of course, as you pointed out, in contrast to other offers in that space, 1 year is already quite a bit. A 3 to 4 year program is really a solid, master level education that you're getting. So you're getting a really strong start, and that's also recognized by the industry.
Superb. It's interesting because the traditional old way of doing things at school and at university was going on YouTube or doing a Google search is almost like cheating. It's like it's a shortcut of what you need to do rather than sitting down and going through a book. And that's almost where like the education system in a lot of ways is outdated, because Google is there. It's there to help. YouTube is there to help. And in real life, that's what you'll use. So why don't you incorporate that into the education system and everything like that? And even in universities now and schools now, I think, it's been a while since I've been at school, but it's definitely not been adopted.
I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. So obviously in lockdown, I'm seeing how it is adopted. And I would actually claim that this might be one of the biggest educational shifts in decades, certainly. And there is a great opportunity and a great danger here. The great opportunity is kids like mine, frankly, where both parents are really there to support the education, where the devices are there, the connectivity is there. It's really amazing. I would say that the kids get to learn really early on that you can ask anything. um, size of the Tower of Pisa to what happened historically, right? All these facts are not there to be remembered, but something to incorporate in your bigger education and in what you know and what you care about. And so having as we used to say in the old idealistic Web 1.0 and 1.2 vision, the knowledge of the world at your fingertips. So I think for those kids, it's really going to be a very empowering technology and something that allows them to see what they're actually interested in and to pursue those interests and then to learn about those things and really go deep on them. So I think, developing grit, developing a reflection of who you are, who you want to be, all these things that are, by the way, part of how we see the education in 42 as well. It's not just about your vocational training. It's really in the old, almost German romantic sense of, developing a humanistic understanding of the world and who you are and where you want to go, right? Those things are not part of the traditional vocational trainings of the craftsmanship, but they should be part of a contemporary education. And sorry, to come back to the kids, I think it's amazing on the one hand what's possible there and to see these new learners grow up. But on the other hand, the school is also a place where everybody is the same, right? No matter who your parents are and what background you have in the school, everybody is equal. And that is a very important aspect of having everybody together in an educational system, learning how to be with these very, very different kids and families is very important. And of course, there is also the opposite of what I described, namely kids where parents don't have a minute to spare on their education, where access to the devices and the connectivity is not there. So the divide between those who have access and have millions of opportunities and those who have very few is growing, and that's a huge societal issue. Sorry, got a bit on a tangent there, but no. I think it's amazing to see these two sides of the flip sides of the same story, right?
Yeah.
How technology is really empowering and enabling at the same time, growing an enormous divide between those who have the access and the knowledge and those who don't.
It's super interesting. So coming back to the education divide and how you've fostered this culture of grit, of mindset, of entrepreneurship in your software engineering school. So how, in practice at 42, how are you fostering this culture? Are there any sort of tangible examples that you can draw to? Because in life, these skills of grit, of a growth mindset, and also that having that sort of entrepreneurial knowledge as well, which I think is something that is completely shut out in the traditional school sense, and something I only really opened my eyes to recently. So what sort of examples in practice would you say you're doing at 42?
Yeah, great. Really good question. Let me try to answer by sharing a bit about how we are selecting people, who are the people who are coming, which is part of fostering that mindset already. Then we have very explicitly defined our values, and then I can give you an example of how we bring it to life and what that actually means. So in terms of the selection process, what people do is, of course, they come to our website, they hear about us, they want to do it, so they register on the site, and then they do an algorithmic thinking test. So it's basically a fairly long, it's a 2-hour experience where you come on the website, you have to perform and to show that you are you have the right mindset and thinking to go to 42. But then you encounter games, you encounter challenges without any explanations or anything that tells you how to do this. So basically, it's try and error, and a lot of people already have a problem with that, right? Just to go and they don't really know, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? Oh, now I failed. So I think that is a first example of how we're fostering that mindset of you want to do it, you want to learn, you're deducing, you have your hat on, right? You're not consuming something that you learn, but you're learning it by going forward. And then when you do a good job in that online test, you get invited to a 4-week boot camp. Again, some other schools that is the whole experience. For us, this is just getting ready, seeing if the style of learning, of working is for you. So you, in non-pandemic times, you actually come to the school for 4 weeks and you start from scratch. So no prior knowledge necessary, but you're actually going in on the deep end. It's called piscine in French, the boot camp. So a swimming pool. So you're jumping in all together and you're finding your way forward in programming C. So basically you have 1 month of 24/7 learning challenges with your peers in learning how to code and write programs in C. And people say in the end, that 1 month was more intense and I learned more than a whole year of university. So it is actually, of course, people sleep, but it is an experience that goes over the weekends where you have exams, where, you're really already engaging in all the learning approaches that I've described before, right? The peer reviews and so on and so forth. So by the end of the month, and we know whether this is a good fit for you, because clearly, you need to be organized, you need to be dedicated, hungry for the knowledge. This is not for everybody. I'm always saying, we're complementing the existing educational model and academia, and hopefully there is some things that are inspiring and useful for them as well. But I don't think the 42 model is really for everybody, certainly not in this moment. So from the boot camps in February, March, and April, we will select the first 150 students to start with us in May. Same sequence of boot camps will happen again in August, September, and October, and then the second cohort starting in November. Same thing in 2022. So by the end of 2022, we will have 600 students in the school and have reached our capacity. Now, when they come to the school in May, it's going to be, of course, a unique moment because they're the first ones. So we have prepared a really nice environment. It's an old market hall in the middle of Wolfsburg, 2 minutes from the train station, so about an hour and a bit from Berlin. And, it has everything you'd imagine in a contemporary work organization. There is a real kitchen to cook food for a whole team. There is a VR lab, and a video lab, a fab lab, all these kind of stuff for people to nerd out and really pursue their passions. And we're really there to make that experience work for them, in contrast a bit to the academic system where, you are more a user of an apparatus that is bureaucratic and not necessarily designed for you, but designed to work as an institution. So, sorry, I know I'm raving on a bit, but what I wanted to get to is because there's nothing, we've asked ourselves, what is it that the students need when they start? And what we agreed was, of course, our mission is to provide that environment and to allow them to educate themselves and to learn. But the second part is our values. And we've defined radical inclusion, for example, a principle from the Burning Man Festival. And we've taken values from the hacker work ethic, from the United Nations Global Compact, from Ray Dalio's principles. So really a diverse set of values. And, one of them is that we want people to take ownership. And that's the example that I'm going to share with you, is that Mitbestimmung, the idea of student participation, that all stakeholders have to sit together and discuss how they want to handle things, what the practices in the school are at the heart of what we do. So, for example, we bought 2 really nice Italian espresso machines, and they're there for the students. We'll have beautiful, great coffee, but there is no rules on how to organize that practice of allowing everybody to get coffee. So, it's up to them, up to the students to organize. We certainly won't clean up after them every day, right, after every coffee they make. So that's how the values get translated into practice. It's like this is not a full service institution. This is a place for participation where the students have a lot of opportunities and really get a lot of support for pursuing opportunities, but it's up to them to really make it happen. We're there to provide guidance and write down what we consider best practices, but that's how the values get translated into reality.
Amazing. Seems like a fascinating place to learn. How does the business model work? How is this all monetized? Do the students pay? Do you have investors?
So it's 100% tuition free for the students.
Wow.
And the model works because right now, just in Germany, there is more than 68,000 job openings for software engineers. So industry is really eager to develop a pipeline of talent in that space, as you know, from your job. It's really in high demand. So the model, not just in Wolfsburg, but for all 42 schools around the world, is that either an individual organization or philanthropist donates the money to fund the operations of the school, or it's a conglomerate of donors. And it's always not for profit. So, it's free for the students. And in our case, Volkswagen is in the middle of a huge transformation, both, of course, electrifying their vehicles and digitizing their vehicles. And just from the car.software organization that was founded last year, they are developing an operating system for all their cars. That's an endeavor that takes thousands of software engineers. And so they're very hungry and have the need for a steady flow of talent. And that's why they very kindly funded both the initial setup as well as the operations for the first 5 years. And, we, of course, are very happy and thankful for them and work with them on things like special programs for software engineering, automotive, and mobility ecosystems. But it's very important to state that we are an independent, not-for-profit company or an association, actually, not a company, an association, and that our students are really at the center of what we do. So they decide where they want to go for their internships. They decide where they want to work after their studies. And, a lot of them actually decide to work freelance or to start a company. A lot of them will go to small and medium-sized companies. And, of course, some will opt, and some are interested in working for big companies in the area. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that the setup is also working out for Volkswagen itself, of course.
It's absolutely fascinating. It's amazing you get free tuition. I was educated in the UK, and my university fees, I think I'll probably be paying that off in the next century when I'm long gone. So it's a nice bonus in Germany. So it's been really interesting, and we will finish up soon, but it's been really interesting to hear kind of how things are done and the approach to learning and the problem that you're really trying to solve. I think it's a really interesting and new way of looking at things, and it's definitely the future of how to do things. Learning by rote, learning through books, and just learning almost and doing exercises for the sake of doing it. I think that should be a thing of the past. But we've covered a lot of your how and the methods behind it. But when it comes to you personally, I know you were at Google for a while, and now you've switched to this. So why are you doing all this? What's kind of the underlying reason for you personally and your kind of life mission? Because not everyone would leave such a great job at Google to do this. So there must be something more to your why.
That's a deep question, man.
It is. We've got to get deep sometimes.
So happy to give it a shot. As I mentioned before, I had the luxury of defining my life's philosophy in my PhD. So this knowledge entrepreneurship is really something that I think is a really good idea and a good metaphor to think about how you can enable an entrepreneurial mindset, but not one that's aimed at making the most money, but one that's aimed at learning the most and spreading the most knowledge. I think that's a great mission because you get to learn a lot yourself, and it sets you up for a continuous learning journey, and ideally growing expertise and perspective, and with that you're able to provide value. And secondly, because obviously when you go into philosophy, one fundamental paradigm shift in the last 150, 200 years was Aufklärung, was enlightenment. And what that means is that people who have undergone that training or have undergone that experience of seeing themselves as responsible being with a free will, only then can you trigger the entrepreneurship of taking the agency yourself of doing something. And to light up that candle, right? To have that moment of enlightenment, of Aufklärung. Aufklärung is actually a beautiful term in German. It means to clear up, right? That that fog is opening up and you see clearly. That experience, I think, is what I'm most fascinated by and that I'm most motivated by, to bring that to as many people as possible, because only once you have that moment, and that project of enlightenment is really right in the middle, only when you have that moment will you take a deliberate decision to do something in your life, to develop and dedicate your life to a certain cause. And I think, especially for technologists, right, this is a really important aspect. Frankly, there used to be a mindset that engineers do what others tell them, right? They're kind of the implementers. They do the math and they write the code, but they're not responsible for what the technology does. And that, I think, is a very dangerous ground. And again, something that I would love to see us develop a culture and an education that develops the people in that sense. So my calling at Google, if you want, was to help come up with good governance mechanisms for the internet. And that proved to be a really, really interesting, but also very, very complex task where, you can hardly leave a dent in that universe because the internet is so big that no individual institution and the zeitgeist was not necessarily there to come up with a global internet governance frame. That's what I was thinking and writing and working towards. And what I'm doing now, what fascinates me is, I meet really all these individual people. Like right now, we have these introduction sessions with student candidates, right? And I see them being excited about that opportunity and making those changes, allowing those people, those candidates to grow both in their mindset, in their Weltanschauung, as well as in their skill set to develop successful careers. That seems like a very rewarding endeavor, a very rewarding venture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, in life, purpose, autonomy, and when you realize that you can grow and it's up to you to grow, and you'll fail, but you'll learn. And obviously the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know as well. It's incredibly liberating. And it's a wonderful way to approach life, to approach building a business, and to approach sharing the knowledge and learning with others. So Max, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge, what you're doing at 42, and also your why behind it. There was so much stuff we could have dug into in terms of the governance of the internet, but I think no podcast in the world is long enough to dig into that. And I'm sure we could have turned it into a philosophy podcast as well. But super, super interesting. So thank you so much.
I thank you. It was a lot of fun. I'm happy to come back sometime when we have some experiences from the real world, when the first students are there. I could imagine there is a source of interesting conversations happening. Again, really good talking to you. All the best for your venture. I hope that that you're as successful in finding tech talent for the industry in Germany than we are in producing it. So there is an obvious synergy here. Looking forward to stay in touch.
Yeah, well, there might be a wonderful collaboration one day. Awesome. Thanks, Max. Thank you so much for listening to the Building Our World podcast. To show your support and to stay up to date, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.